Good morning. So the book I'm reading this week is called Little Bits of Sky by S.E. Durrant. And the blurb says as follows: Ira and Zac have been moved around foster homes for as long as they can remember. All they have from their past is a tatty, blurry photograph of a black dog. Then they move into Skilly House, a children's care home in London. It's here that they make friends and lose them again and wait for their lives to begin. And then one day, they do. Today. This is a story of a time when my life turned upside down. Not that it was the right way up before, but for a while it felt like that moment when a clown juggles plates and they're all up in the air, and the only thing you can do is hold your breath and hope they don't come crashing to the ground. I've put this story together from the diaries I kept when Zac and I were children. I wrote them because I felt we were almost invisible, and I wanted to make sure our story was told, and also in the hope that life would get better for the small unloved girl that was me, and my even smaller unloved brother. And if life didn't get better, or at least more interesting, I was going to make it up, to put in witches and castles and rides in fast cars. But I didn't need to. Life got exciting all by itself. My story starts at Skilly House. The garden there was the wildest place I had ever seen. There was a patch of grass big enough to run around in, and on all sides a tangle of scratchy bushes and shrubs, trailing ivy, and a convolvulus that climbed the walls in summer, dotting the garden with flowers. There was a small overgrown pond covered with chicken wire, and there was the fallen tree. I never felt entirely comfortable in Skilly House itself. It was too full of ghosts, but the garden was special. It was the first place I ever felt truly happy. I think Zac felt the same. Not that we wanted to go there, of course. Skilly House, October 1987. My name's Miracle, but I don't tell anyone. It's embarrassing, especially for a care kid. Maybe my mum thought life would be wonderful and perfect when I was born, but it wasn't, and it never has been. That's why everyone calls me Ira. My brother's called Zachary, or Zac. Both names are okay, but Zac suits him better because he's always running. If you call him Zachary, he's gone before you get to the end of his name. We didn't want to come to Skilly. We'd never been in a children's home, and anyway, it wasn't fair we had to move so suddenly. One minute we were eating dinner with Brenda and Alf, seeing how much ketchup we could balance on a chip. The next, Anita was chasing us up to our room to pack our bags. I banged my suitcase all the way down the stairs, which is unusual for me. I normally keep my feelings to myself, being the oldest. Zac stood in the hall with that awful sad face he has when misery's wrapped itself around him so tight he looks like he's choking, and I know it will take ages to dig him out. "Make sure you come and see us, won't you?" Brenda said as she hugged us goodbye. And that made me feel really sad, because I was 9 years old and Zac was 7, and we already knew we'd never see them again. And she was the grown-up and she didn't know. After that, Zac made his mouth into a thin, flat line, and that was that. There was no point in trying to talk to him. We sat in Anita's car and watched the world go by. Our bit of the world, that is, South London. At first, Anita tried to chat. She told us about a James Bond film she saw. She said the actor was really handsome. She probably has his poster on her wall. But we didn't answer, so she gave up trying. I couldn't even think about James Bond. All I could think was the car windows needed cleaning. Anita's our social worker. She dyes her hair to match her lipstick. It's usually red, but we never know what kind of red it's going to be. Sometimes it's pink or orange. It takes our mind off things. Maybe that's why she does it. That day it was red like cherries. She looked like a film star stuck in the wrong film with 2 miserable kids in the back of her car, when really she should have been skydiving or kissing a double agent. It took us ages to get to Skilly. The traffic was all jammed up, and I thought the cars must look like ants from the sky. And I know ants are meant to know exactly what they're doing, but it made me wonder if they felt like we did inside. Lost. When we finally stopped, we were in a street just like the one we came from. Nothing was any different. There were no fields or mountains or waterfalls or chimpanzees or kangaroos. There wasn't even a park. It was just a normal London street with all the houses and flats squeezed in together like rotten teeth. If we hadn't been in the car for an hour, we'd have thought we'd just went round the corner. As Anita parked the car, my heart started jumping around. It always does that just when I wish it would stay still, like if I want people to think I don't care what happens when I do. It's hard to look like you don't care what happens when your heart's doing somersaults. Anita got out our cases and opened the gates to a crumbling old house. I had to pull Zac to make him come. He didn't want to move. He just wanted everything to stop there and then, like if the world could stop, that would be good. When I pulled him, he banged his head on the window. He didn't say anything, but I knew he hated me. The house was tall and scruffy with white paint peeling off, like it had been painted 100 years ago and nobody had bothered to tidy it up ever since. A man was tying a rosebush to the wall. He was trying to stop the roses trailing on the ground. They were small and red and their petals were falling off, but he still wanted to tie them up. I expect they looked nice in summer. Anita said hello, and the man turned round. He was wearing an old leather jacket and his hair was full of ringlets, not shiny like a princess, but all tangled and sticking out. He smiled when he saw us and his face filled with creases. I didn't want to like him, but I couldn't help it. I think the wind's going to blow up a bit, he said. He waved a bit of string. He shook Anita's hand and then he shook ours. I acted like I always shake hands, but really it was the first time it ever happened. Zac's hand went all floppy, like when he pretends he's ill. People don't normally shake hands with care kids. Sometimes they don't even look at us. I'm Silas, the man said. Welcome to Skilly. He's the only Silas I've ever met. He's probably the only one in London. People don't call their kids Silas anymore. It's an olden days name. We walked to the front door and he rang the bell. There was a sign on the wall that said Skilly House 1887, which meant it was built 100 years ago, which is a century. I thought of all the kids who must have stood on the doorstep before us, wondering what would happen next. Maybe their mum had been run over by a horse and carriage, or their dad had got stuck up a chimney, or maybe they just ran out of luck. I turned my face to stone, so whoever opened the door wouldn't see how I felt inside. Zac was taking lots of breaths like he was puffed out, only he wasn't puffed out. He was scared. But the woman who opened the door wasn't scary at all. She was beautiful. She was smiling and smiling like she'd been looking forward to seeing us all day, and finally we'd come. Children, she said, come in, we've been waiting for you. She put out her hands and wrapped them around us. It felt so nice. She had yellow beads on the end of her dreadlocks and they bounced like bees. I wanted to hold one, but I didn't. I just touched one really gently so she wouldn't notice. It felt lucky. Silas said, this is Hortense. She'll settle you in. Then he went back to his rosebush. We went inside with Hortense and stood in the hall. It was dark and the stairs went up, and I tried to imagine them going all the way up to the sky, and at the top there'd be a big burst of light. Then I had a feeling someone was watching us, and when I turned round I saw a woman standing in a doorway. I thought she was a ghost at first. A shiver went right down my spine. She was very thin and she was standing as still as a skeleton, and she was staring at me and Zac like she wished we'd never arrived. Like if she could wind back time, she'd make us walk right back out the door and lock it behind us. Hortense said, meet Mrs. Clanks, manager of Skilly, and the woman came over. She walked really straight like a soldier, and her shoes went tap-tap on the floor, so I knew she was real. Ghosts don't make noises. It takes all their effort just to be here at all. That's why you don't see them much. She was old and her hair was tied back and she had a frown between her eyes that looked like it had been there forever. Like she might have been the first baby ever to be born with a frown. She was wearing boring grown-up clothes except for one thing. She had a pink shiny ribbon in her hair. I wondered if someone had put it there and she didn't know yet, but it didn't make me want to laugh, it made me embarrassed. She shook Anita's hand and said, good afternoon. Then she smiled at me and Zac. Only it wasn't the kind of smile that makes you glad to be there. It was the kind of smile you give someone when you wish they lived hundreds of miles away, like in Australia. Hortense will show you your room, she said. She said it just like that. Not hello or how was your journey. She said it like a plumber had come to fix a leak and she had to tell them where the pipes were, and they better get on with it before everything flooded. Not like some kids had come to their new home where they might have to stay forever. I wanted to shout that we weren't staying. I had to grit my teeth to stop it coming out. I wanted to shout that we hated it here already and we were going back to Brenda and Alf, but I couldn't. Zac would be upset, and anyway, it never works. Even if the cutest little kid makes a fuss, nothing changes. Not if they're a care kid. Anita usually smiles when she leaves us because smiles spread. If one person smiles, that makes the next person smile, and it goes on and on. You can cheer up a whole crowd of people that way. It's like magic. But that day she couldn't smile. Her face just wouldn't make the right shape. She knelt down in front of me and Zac and gave us a kiss. "Off you go," she said. "I'll see you soon." She still looked like a film star, only now she was in a war film watching her children be evacuated to the country, and she was being brave. She left cherry lipstick on Zac's cheek. Then she wiped it away. We followed Hortense up the stairs. I pretended she was an angel taking us to heaven, but I couldn't do it for long. Kids were peering at us through the banisters and sticking out their tongues. A tall boy threw a ball of paper at my shoulder. I pretended I hadn't noticed, but I could hear him sniggering. The stair carpet was so old you could see threads where the soft bits had worn away. It might have been nice once because it still had flower patterns, but now they were muddy like at the bottom of a pond. Every step creaked, and the creaks were all in different places. Some were in the middle of the step and some were on the edges, and some steps seemed fine, but when you took your foot off they gave a little squeak. You could never go up or down those stairs quietly. You'd have to learn where the creaks were. There were drawings on the walls and writing that had been smudged out, maybe because it said someone loved someone else and they changed their mind, or maybe because it said something horrible. And there was dust on every step. I had to try really hard not to think about it because dust comes from dead skin, so it must have come from the children who walked up the stairs before us. Maybe even from children who are dead. I just concentrated on counting the steps. I always do that in new places. I always count the steps going up so I know how many I have to go down. It's one of my habits. From the hall up to our room is 47 steps. Our bedroom is right at the top of the house. You can't go any further. It's nice like that. No one walks past. When we got there, Hortense said, "Best room in the house," and opened the door like we'd just arrived on holiday or something, not in a children's home. But actually, it's okay. It's got a sloping roof on one side and a window on the other, and from the window you can see the garden. There were 2 beds with duvets and bobbly blankets, and there was a sink with yellow stains going from the taps to the plug hole. There was a wardrobe and some drawers and a table, and there was tape stuck to the walls where kids had taken off their posters. There was a rug on the floor that was so old the colour had faded away, and under the rug there were floorboards. Hortense put her head to one side and looked at us like a heron searching for fish in a pond. "It'll feel very different once you've settled in," she said. Then she opened the window and a breeze came into the room and it felt lovely, and I looked out and saw a bird fly into a tree. "Now," Hortense said, "come and see the garden." The garden at Skilly is amazing. It's huge and raggedy and full of hiding places, and even though there are buildings all around, it feels like it's on its own. There was a shed and a pond with chicken wire over the top, and there was a huge tree in the middle. When the sun came through the leaves, it made patches of light on the grass. We had the garden all to ourselves that afternoon. We didn't know it then, but that's what they do with new kids. They let them play in the garden on their own. At first, Zac wouldn't let go of my hand, but then he found a stick and started hitting the tree. Bits of bark were flying off. I didn't say anything. I just walked away. Then I spun round and round until I was so dizzy I had to lie down. And as I lay there, I let my head fill up with the blue sky, and then I didn't want to shout any more. That's the thing about sky. No matter how bad things are, you can always look up at the sky, and then you feel better. So that was part of the opening chapter of Little Bits of Sky by S.E. Durrant. Hope you enjoyed it.